This story takes place in Denver on a freezing winter evening. Mike and his friend Sarah were heading to a dinner party, the snow swirling around them like icy whispers. Sarah drove cautiously, the road beneath her tires already slick with snow. Mike, ever the curious one, insisted they stop by a liquor store to grab some craft beers and whiskey. A necessity, he had called it.
Sarah pulled into the parking lot, already annoyed at the detour. She watched impatiently as Mike ran back inside to grab a pack of nicotine pouches, leaving her alone in the car. The snow fell heavier now, veiling the world in a soft, unsettling white.
The two friends eventually set off again, their car cutting through the thick snow like a blade. The roads, once familiar, now felt foreign under the weight of the storm. They laughed nervously, trying to shake off the growing tension brought on by the weather. But then, rounding a bend, they came upon something that made Sarah slam on the brakes. In the middle of the road sat a car, its hazard lights blinking like warnings in the night. Both front doors were wide open, as if someone had left in a hurry. Snow was already beginning to pile inside the abandoned vehicle. Sarah's instinct was to drive around it, but Mike, ever the bleeding heart, insisted they stop. "What if someone needs help?" he asked. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed, though every nerve in her body told her to keep going. The car idled as Sarah and Mike sat in silence, watching the eerie scene unfold. "Let's give it a few minutes," Sarah said, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Maybe someone will come back." But the minutes stretched long and no one appeared. The snow seemed to muffle all sound, turning the world outside into an unnerving vacuum. Mike finally lost patience and opened the door. "I'm checking it out," he said, his voice tinged with determination. Sarah shouted after him, her breath fogging up the car windows, but Mike was already trudging through the snow toward the abandoned vehicle. Mike peered inside the car. It was empty, no sign of the driver or passengers, just an eerie silence and a faint smell of stale cigarettes. But then, Sarah saw it. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a dark shape shifting behind a snowbank near the edge of the road. Her heart leaped into her throat as she leaned forward, squinting through the fogged windshield, and then the car jolted. Just slightly, but enough to send her into a panic. She slammed on the horn, the blaring sound cutting through the heavy quiet like a knife. Mike jumped, startled, and turned back toward the car. He sprinted toward Sarah, slipping on the icy road but not stopping until he was safely back in the passenger seat. "Drive," he panted. Now, Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She floored it, the tires spinning for a moment before catching traction. As they sped away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and thought she saw something, or someone, step out from behind the snowbank. The rest of the drive was tense. Mike berated her for honking the horn, but she shot back, "Something wasn't right about that car, and you know it." By the time they arrived at the dinner party, the tension between them had faded. The warmth of the house and the laughter of friends provided a welcome distraction from the unsettling encounter. It wasn't until hours later, when the snowstorm had worsened, that the host turned on the TV. The local news station was issuing a warning about a string of carjackings. The anchor described an alarming pattern: abandoned vehicles left in the middle of snowy roads with their hazard lights on. When Good Samaritans stopped to help, armed assailants would spring from hiding places, sometimes from within the car itself. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Sarah and Mike exchanged horrified glances as the news anchor continued. The most recent incident had occurred just a few hours earlier, only a few miles from where they had stopped. Mike muttered, "That could have been us." Sarah could barely process what she was hearing. She thought about how close they had come to stepping into that trap, how the slightest hesitation might have led to something far worse. She realized that her paranoia, her gut instinct, had likely saved their lives. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The image of the abandoned car, its hazards blinking in the snow, replayed in her mind, over and over again. Sarah never forgot that night. It wasn't just the fear of what might have happened. It was the chilling realization of how easily they had been lured into danger. Years later, she would still find herself glancing nervously at cars with their hazard lights on, wondering if someone was genuinely in need or if it was something far darker. After all, sometimes the most terrifying traps are the ones we're meant to fall into. The clock on Jenna's dashboard read 11:47 p.m. as her car sped down the highway. She'd stayed late at the library finishing her thesis and was now desperate to get home. The drive stretched on, the highway nearly deserted save for a few scattered vehicles that appeared and disappeared, like fleeting memories. Jenna turned up the radio, hoping some music might help her stay alert. The road ahead was empty, bathed in the dull glow of her headlights. The landscape beyond was dark and featureless, an endless expanse of nothingness. As she approached a curve in the road, Jenna noticed headlights behind her. A car had appeared out of nowhere, its beams bright and glaring in her rearview mirror. What? At first, Jenna thought nothing of it. Maybe the driver had just entered the highway. But as the minutes passed, she noticed the car wasn't pulling ahead or falling behind. It stayed locked in position, a steady presence in her rearview mirror. Maybe they're just headed the same way, Jenna muttered to herself, trying to dismiss the growing anxiety gnawing at her. She switched lanes, hoping the car would pass. Instead, it followed. Her pulse quickened. She sped up, and so did the car. For the first time, Jenna noticed something odd. She couldn't make out the driver. The glare of the headlights was too bright, and the car's interior was shrouded in darkness. Jenna tried to stay calm. She told herself it was just her imagination, that she was overreacting. But when she glanced back again, she saw it. A shadowy figure in the car behind her, barely visible through the glare. It didn't look like the driver was moving. They just sat there, eerily still. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she turned onto an exit ramp, hoping to lose them. But the car followed, its headlights unwavering. Jenna's breathing grew shallow, panic setting in. She grabbed her phone to dial 911, but the screen flickered and went black. "No signal," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jenna's eyes scanned the road ahead. A flickering neon sign came into view. Gas and go, 24 hours. Relief washed over her. She pulled into the station, parking near the entrance where the bright lights offered some sense of safety. The car didn't follow. Its headlights dimmed as it slowed, coming to a stop on the side of the highway. Jenna kept one eye on it as she stepped out of her car. The air was icy, the kind that stings your lungs with every breath. The gas station looked deserted. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the windows were fogged, obscuring the interior. She pushed open the door, the bell above jingling eerily. "Hello?" Jenna called, her voice echoing. No response. Jenna approached the counter, hoping to find an attendant, but the station was empty. The faint smell of stale coffee and gasoline lingered in the air. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerators lining the back wall. She glanced out the window. The car was still there, its headlights off now. Jenna's stomach churned as she realized she couldn't see the driver. A sudden noise made her jump. A soft creak, like a door opening. She spun around, her eyes darting to the gas station's rear door. It was slightly ajar, swaying in the breeze. "Is someone there?" she called, her voice shaking. No answer. Panic set in. Jenna bolted for her car, her heart pounding in her ears. She slammed the door shut, locking it in one swift motion. Her fingers fumbled as she turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life and Jenna sped out of the gas station. But as she merged back onto the highway, her blood turned cold. The car was behind her again, its headlights blinding in her rearview mirror. This time, it was closer. Too close. The figure inside was no longer still. It moved, jerky and unnatural, like a marionette on tangled strings. Jenna's breathing quickened as she floored the gas pedal. Jenna spotted a rest area up ahead, its lights glowing faintly through the darkness. She swerved into the lot, pulling up next to a parked semi-truck. Her hands trembled as she killed the engine. The car sped past, its headlights disappearing into the night. Jenna exhaled, relief flooding her body. She sat in silence, waiting to be sure the danger was gone. But then she felt it, a presence. Slowly, Jenna turned to the passenger seat. Her scream tore through the night. Sitting next to her was the figure, its face pale and grinning, eyes wide and unblinking. It had been in her car all along. Jenna's car was found the next morning, abandoned at the rest area. No one ever discovered what happened to her or the mysterious figure she saw that night. And so, travelers beware. When you're alone on the road at night, always check your rearview mirror. You might not be the only one in the car.